All right, so picture this. You're at home, just chilling, trying to figure out what you're going to have for dinner. Maybe order some takeout because you don't feel like cooking. And then, boom, right there on your door, you see it, a 60-day notice to vacate. Talk about killing your vibe.
Yeah, it's not a good feeling.
Like, even if you think you know your way around renting and tenant rights, seeing that notice can really throw you for a loop.
Absolutely. It's like that moment when you know something big is about to change, and it can be pretty overwhelming.
Definitely. So to try and shed some light on this whole thing, we're going to do a deep dive into these 60-day notices to vacate, specifically here in California, where the laws can sometimes feel like they're straight out of a movie.
Oh, yeah. Things can get interesting, that's for sure. We've got all the info right here from legal guides that focus on California tenant law. And let me tell you, there are some twists and turns.
Ooh, I love a good legal twist. All right, so let's start with the basics. For anyone who's new to this whole renting scene, when we talk about a 60-day notice, we're talking about an official legal document, right?
Right. It's not just a casual, hey, you should probably move out soon kind of thing.
Okay, so not a text message from the landlord then?
Definitely not. We're talking about a formal notification that's legally required to end a month-to-month rental agreement. This isn't really about those fixed-term leases, or at least not usually.
Okay, hold on. I'm already sensing things might get a little tricky here. So if my lease is up in a couple of months, this isn't the document I should be expecting.
If you've got a lease with an end date, then that date pretty much acts as the notice itself. But here's the thing. Don't get too comfy. Just because you have a lease doesn't mean that a 60-day notice is completely out of the picture. There are some situations where it might still come into play, even if you have a lease.
Okay, see, now that's what I'm talking about. The plot thickens.
We'll get into all those details later, but first we got to clear up a common misunderstanding about that 60-day part. You see, California likes to keep things interesting. It's not always a full 2 months, you know what I mean?
All right, spill the tea. What's the deal with that 30-day notice I keep hearing about?
You're on the right track. If you haven't been living in a place for a full year yet, then usually you only need to give or receive a 30-day notice. It's kind of California's way of recognizing that shorter tenancies might need things to move a little faster.
Okay, that makes sense. But our legal guides also mentioned something about a 3-day notice to quit. Now, that sounds a lot less like a curveball and more like a legal asteroid.
You could say that again.
3 days to pack up your entire life, what would even lead to something like that?
Yeah, that's basically the equivalent of your landlord hitting the panic button. We're talking serious lease violations here, like significant damage to the property, illegal activities going on, or constantly missing rent payments.
So basically, things that go way beyond just being a little messy or spilling something on the carpet.
Right. It's all about breaches of contract that are serious enough to warrant such a short notice period.
Okay, so if you get one of those, it's time to either seriously get your act together or start packing those boxes. But let's say you get a 60-day notice and your lease isn't naturally coming to an end, it seems like. In California, at least in some cities, landlords can't just evict you for no reason, right?
That's right.
They need to have what's called a just cause, a legally valid reason.
Exactly. It's like a rule in the game of renting landlords need to play by the rules too, and just cause. Ordinances are there to make sure
These ordinances protect tenants from being evicted for no reason, am I right?
They basically force landlords to prove they have a good reason to end the tenancy, even if they're giving proper notice.
So not just on a whim.
Nope. There needs to be a solid reason. And these reasons typically fall into two main categories: at-fault evictions and no-fault evictions, kind of like two sides of the same coin.
Okay, let's break those down because now I'm really curious.
Sure thing.
I'm guessing at fault, evictions are pretty straightforward.
You're right on them, but they usually involve the violations we already talked about, like not paying rent, damaging the property, disturbing other tenants, the kind of stuff that gives a landlord a good reason to end the lease.
And then there's the no-fault evictions, which sound kind of like a head-scratcher.
Yeah, no-fault evictions can definitely be a bit more confusing.
Because it's like, what am I doing wrong?
Exactly. It's not really about the tenant doing anything wrong. It's more about the landlord wanting to end the tenancy for reasons that are separate from how the tenant is behaving.
Okay, so give me a classic example of a no-fault eviction.
Well, a really common one is the whole owner move-in situation.
Wait, really? So you're telling me a landlord can actually evict a tenant just because they or a family member wants to move into the property?
Yeah, that's right. It's totally legal in many cases across California. It's considered a valid reason for a no-fault eviction.
Wow, that's kind of rough, though. What if you're a good tenant paying your rent on time? no complaints, and then suddenly you got to move out because the landlord's cousin needs a place to stay.
I know it can seem unfair, right? And that's why some areas have added in these rules about relocation assistance for tenants who are facing no-fault evictions.
Okay, so there's at least some protection for renters in certain places.
Exactly. It's not like landlords can just hand you a notice and say, see you later. There are rules they have to follow.
So this relocation assistance, I'm guessing it's not just like a universal thing across California.
You're catching on. It definitely varies depending on where you are. Some cities might offer a few $1,000s to help with moving costs, while others base it on things like your income or how long you've lived in the unit. It can get kind of complicated.
So basically, another reason why it's super important to know your local laws, right?
Exactly. The more you know, the better prepared you'll be.
Okay, so let's backtrack a little bit. Let's say you get that 60-day notice. For whatever reason, what's the first thing you should do?
Well, I think the most common reaction is to panic a little bit.
Understandably so.
Right. It's like your mind starts racing, thinking about finding a new place, packing up all your stuff, dealing with the logistics. It can be overwhelming.
Totally. But before you go into full-on panic mode, what are some things people should keep in mind?
The important thing is to remember you have options. This isn't a hopeless situation.
Okay. I like the sound of that. What's like the first line of defense when that notice shows up?
Well, a lot of people overlook this, but you really got to take the time to read through that notice carefully. And I mean, like, really scrutinize it.
Really? Like those terms and conditions nobody ever reads?
Kind of, but in this case, it's crucial. You got to look for any errors or inconsistencies like typos, incorrect dates, wrong addresses, anything that seems off.
Wait, seriously, you're saying there might be mistakes on these notices? I always thought they were like super official and error-proof.
You'd be surprised how often there are mistakes. And trust me, even small errors can sometimes make a big difference, legally speaking.
Wow, okay, so it's kind of like a game of legal, where's Waldo?
Haha. Yeah, something like that. You got to be on the lookout for those hidden discrepancies.
So let's say you've checked the notice and everything seems to be in order. What's next? Is it even worth talking to the landlord at that point?
You know, it's funny because a lot of people avoid talking to their landlord, but you'd be surprised how often a little communication can go a long way.
It's like they say communication is key, right?
Exactly. And you never know. Your landlord might be open to working something out, especially if you've been a good tenant up until this point.
Yeah, like maybe there's a misunderstanding or they might be willing to be flexible with the move-out date. You got to at least try, right?
Definitely. It's always worth a shot.
Okay, but let's say you've tried all that. The notice is solid. Your landlord is sticking to their guns. Are there any other options left on the table, or is it time to start packing?
Don't give up just yet. If you truly believe that the eviction is unfair or that your landlord hasn't followed the proper procedures, you can actually contest the notice.
Okay, now we're getting into some serious legal territory.
Yeah, it can get a bit more complex, and it might be a good idea to talk to a lawyer who specializes in tenant law.
Yeah, a lawyer who really knows their stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can help you understand all the legal ins and outs and make sure you're doing everything right.
So for those of us who get a little intimidated by the thought of going to court, can you give us an idea of what contesting an eviction might look like?
Well, it definitely varies depending on the situation, but it could involve things like filing official documents with the court, presenting evidence to support your case, and potentially even going before a judge. It's not always easy, but it's your right as a tenant.
Right, because everyone deserves to feel safe and secure in their home, and sometimes that means standing up for your rights. And speaking of feeling secure, we talked about those no-fault evictions earlier, and I keep thinking about those relocation assistance laws you mentioned. They vary from city to city, but what about that Ellis Act? Our legal guides mentioned that one sounded kind of intense.
The Ellis Act, yeah. It's definitely a unique situation in the world of evictions. It basically allows landlords to evict tenants in order to take the entire building off the rental market altogether.
Wait, hold on. So they can just evict everyone in the building just like that? What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, the idea is to give landlords a way to exit the rental business if they want to. Like maybe they're looking to convert the building into condos or sell it to a developer. It's like their way of cashing out.
Wow, so it's like a landlord's ultimate power move.
You could say that, but it's not like they could just slap a notice on everybody's door and call it a day.
Yeah.
There are specific rules and regulations they have to follow, including providing relocation assistance to the tenants who are being displaced.
Okay, so there are some protections in place for tenants, even in those situations.
Exactly. It's not a free-for-all for landlords.
Okay, good to know. But let's switch gears a bit for a moment. Let's say moving out is unavoidable for whatever reason. You've looked at all your options, and it's time to face the music and pack those boxes. Are there any, Legal traps to watch out for during the move-out process? I've had some horror stories about security deposit disputes.
Oh, yeah. Security deposit disputes. Those are classic. It's like a rite of passage for renters. But seriously, you're right to be cautious even when you're moving out. You got to protect yourself. And the best way to do that is to document everything. Well, maybe not everything, but you know what I mean. Take pictures, take videos of the unit's condition before you move out. That way you have proof if any questions come up later about damages or anything like that.
Right, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, especially when it comes to those mysterious stains on the carpet.
Exactly. And another thing, familiarize yourself with California's laws regarding security deposit returns. Landlords have to follow certain rules and timelines for returning your deposit or giving you a list of deductions for damages.
It's like arming yourself with knowledge before you head into battle.
That's a great way to put it. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to renting.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into California eviction notices, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that as a tenant, you have rights. You have a say in what happens, and you don't have to navigate these situations alone.
That's a great point. There are resources available to help you understand your rights and figure out the best course of action for your situation.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to reach out for help if you need it.
Well said. And remember, everyone, knowledge is power. So keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep into the world around you. Until next time.
Call now, 714-442-9741. Protecting your rights. Like and follow for more legal insights. Your safety matters. If you faced an injury due to property negligence, seek help. We are here to assist you.